And then, and I think for a lot of us, the burgeoning, the excitement of the kind of 78, early 80s had kind of declined. And then 2002 happens. Yes, yeah.
We'll come to Frank and then we'll come back to you. Thank you so much.
Good evening. When I was a kid, the first book I ever read was called Weep Not Child by Njugi Owuour. It had a main character called Njoroge. Njoroge is my second name. So for the first time, I saw myself depicted in this medium. I saw people who look like me, people who speak like me, depicted in literature, and I fell in love with reading. So the subsequent books I read Meja Mwangi, I read Charles Mangua, and all these books were talking about the socioeconomic realities of post-colonial Kenya, how the promise of independence was betrayed. So as a kid, I came into being as Kibaki was the president, and I went through the free primary education, so I got the literacy to understand the world around me. In 2007, that world almost shattered because the post-election violence affected my hometown, which is Naivasha. So many people died, but towards 2010, we got the new constitution, and this promise was still there. We had hope for the future. In 2013, the state betrayed us again, but the people elected the perpetrators of the 2007 elections. Post-elections violence. Then when I started writing, I realized that we were still living under the same betrayal that the people I read as a kid wrote about. Because I remember even at the start, when we started writing, like about 4 years ago, we were talking with Cave, and we used to wonder why were the things that Meja Mwangi wrote about, the social conditions, still reflected in our society today. So we were living in this loop that these people from the 60s and 70s went through, and we are still experiencing the same things. So yeah.
Wow, thank you so much for that. I have so many things to pick up from each of you. I hardly know where to begin, but I'll come back first to you, Yvonne, and really, I wanted to touch on that thing that you talked about, the terrible period of the 80s. There was this, which I think was quite a deliberate moment, when we can say that for the first time, Moi and Ngugi wa Thiong'o completely agreed about the intense power of the arts and of the creative sector. And my mom, and you know, one's forcefulness was to destroy it, and the other one was to sort of desperately try to keep it together. My mother, when I asked her about why that period of the 60s and 70s had so much cohesion and power, and why it had to be taken apart so strongly, she'd said to me that like there was such a deep relationship between the people in the academy, so the academics, the artists and the writers and the avant-garde of thought, who were sort of really exploring what anything really meant together with people, and then the media, who then could like make and popularize those ideas. And this was a really, really powerful weapon that anybody planning to set up a dictatorial regime would have to destroy. And after sharing that rather long introduction, I wonder if you could say a little bit more of what your experience was about, you know, how that played out for you in your experience of literature. You started to talk about it. I'd love to hear a bit more.
No, so actually, I think we forget that we've, as Frank so very clearly pointed out, it's been an ongoing betrayal, and it starts in 1963. Don't forget that Kenya's first detainee wasn't because of his politics, Abdul Latif Abdallah. It was because of his literature, Kenya Twendapi, and he was the first. He spent quite a long time in solitary confinement simply because of his literature, and that was during the Kenyatta regime. So there had been always a suspicion of the literary world. And I think we tend to forget that also following the pogroms of 1969, there was a purge of those who were in the humanities by the Kenyatta regime also in the 70s. So the continuation of what Moi does, but Moi becomes very strange only after the 1982 coup d'etat. And when he tries to crack down on everybody, including Karl Marx. He said, where's this Karl Marx anyway? But it's also the season of the SAPs, what do they call the
structural adjustment
programs, which collapses everything that we know and we had taken for granted in the society. The end of leisure, for example, the reprioritization of all sorts of things because the World Bank and these Bretton Woods institutions take over the Kenyan space. And this shallow-minded, myopic, I can't say assholes, can I?
I think you can. I think we're going to take assholes. Are we taking assholes? We'll take assholes, yes.
Make the assumption that this terrible assumption that the African person really has no time for leisure and must get preoccupied by also, the bread and butter issues. So what happens then is there are all sorts of NGOs and sprout all over the country, and the kind of literature they are looking for is particularly specific. Tuberculosis, the malaria net, and you've got all these people who are writing about this, and there was and the need for a certain imaging of especially the men. So the men has to be violent, and the domestic violent narratives kind of all pop out. I mean, if you look at fortunately, I imagine that a lot of that literature has disappeared, fortunately. But yeah, that's a kind of so-called literature that is allowed. And I say allowed simply because this was the literature this is where the money was. This was what was funded. It wasn't just in literature, it happened in film, it happened also, I think the visual arts mostly survived, but a lot of the visual arts was also that kind of simplification of the country, of the place. The pace setters disappear. The literatures of Africa that we were accessing in Nairobi kind of become very difficult to find. You go into bookshops and you're finding a lot of, if it's not kind of the Sidney Sheldons and the Daniel Steeles, you're not finding the literatures of Africa on the bookshelves. Or if it is, it's right at the back of the shop. I love going to Sarit Center now. I always want to remind them, do you remember when the literatures of Africa would be kind of like in the bottom shelf? Yeah. So, and I think, and at that time, as one also coming of age, and had all this energy, all this desire to create, but I never thought it was possible at all. And I know there were so many others that either lost the will or never imagined that there was any room for them to write the kind of stories of the actual lives of our peoples and our place. So for me, the emergence of Binyavanga was very much like a kind of a revelation, not quite a second coming, but a liberating moment, the thing that bursts, forgive the French, bursts the pus and allows us to say, so we can actually do the navel gazing thing. All right, yeah.
Thank you for that, Yvonne. Frank, I wanted to come back to you again and continue the inquiry from a slightly different perspective, just so that we stay in sort of beginning to locate where our writing starts from. You spend a lot of time with Kariara. Now, he's not my literal uncle. He's my mother's best friend uncle. But you spend a lot of time with Kariara and with his poetry and you write about it, I believe. And I was so curious and fascinated to know where this interest started and what that journey has been like for you. Yeah.
Recency bias kind of makes readers concentrate on the writers that are working within one era, that we forget even the writers you are reading had inspirations, and the understanding of craft comes from somewhere. Because I remember one of my favorite Kenyan poets, her name is Naomi Wawero. I asked her randomly, who is your favorite Kenyan poet? And she told me Kariara. This was years ago, and I was like, I don't know who Kariara is. So I had to go back and research and see, oh, there was this person who did these great things. And the first time I read him, I was obsessed. I was like, why don't people know this? So I tend to believe that writers writing within the present era have a responsibility to their readers to inform them that this thing we do doesn't come out of nowhere. Because I don't believe that, as Keith said, Kwani with a Q wouldn't exist without Kwani with a K. Kwani with a K is another era, and I believe Binyavanga wouldn't exist without Njugi before that. So it's a whole chain of inspirations. And for me, because I write poetry a lot, Kariara has been the chain of inspiration I look up to. That, like, the farthest inspiration in this country I can go back to is Kariara. Yeah.
Thank you for that. And it's fascinating that you talk about those legacies and the duty of the current generation to keep pulling back on those legacies. You mentioned like Binyavanga's inspiration. I can tell you that I know that his aunt, Rebecca Njau, who was his aunt, was a huge part of beginning to form the idea that this is something that you could do. And she was part of a collective called the Payapa Collective, which was artists and writers, people like Sam Kahiga, people like Jonathan Kariara, again, was a co-founder of that Payapa gallery and community built around Elimu Njau, and the work that they were doing was just the same thing that you're describing so well, Keith, in terms of like really also understanding that interplay between artist communities in different practices. As you continue to conceptualize like the journey for Kwani with a Q. We are still in the debate about whether we're going to go. Are we doing Kwani with a K or Kwani with a Q? What are we saying? How many Qs in the house? And how many Kwani with a K? How many have we got? Yes. Well, it's a bit of a tie at the moment, so we'll you do yours and I'll do mine, right? What do you feel like it was that was missing, that you feel like Kwani with a Q came to respond to? What was that space that, drawing inspiration from what Chemi Chemi had done before, that you felt that you needed to step up to? Yeah.
Again, just as we had during the festival launch, because when we initially started, we mostly had writers, and our target audience, even when starting off, was basically university students, because at the time we were, again, all university students. And interestingly, again, when we look at most of the literary magazines that we talked about in the 1960s, Busara, Gala, Nexus, most of them, again, that was the particular target audience. They're just the university students who are writing about their identity and how they feel about this new nation that they're having. And so once again, us, even when starting off, we realized we started off by, first of all, going with these artists, with these writers. But then when the audience that was in attendance, because we were able to manage to pull off a very huge crowd, because when we started off, it was just us inviting other writers. And then since each and every writer at that particular time had their own blog. So of course, when you have a blog, you have those 5 friends of yours whom you share your work with. You keep telling them, please read my work, please read my work, and they keep ignoring you. So our aim for when we were starting Kwani was that, we have decided to compile all these stories into a book, so why don't you invite those 5 friends of yours whom used to read your work and tell them that we have this book, so that when they finally get to read this book, they'll get to learn about another writer whom they previously hadn't known about, and now they'll get, so basically we'll be expanding an audience for these writers. And so since for the first ever book we had 37 writers, so 37, just roughly telling each and every one of them to bring 5 people, so that was, well, around 185, but eventually 400. So we realized that we have this community of young people that are eager to get a taste of the arts. And we have, again, these artists who are eager to showcase their art. And so since we were able to pull in this audience, and this audience was really asking us to give them, provide more. After the launch, they asked us for an open mic. After the open mic, they asked for another one. And so we realized that there's this gap that exists, and that we are standing at the exact right place where we can bridge the artists who are looking to showcase their work to the audience who are looking to enjoy the work. And so that's how we decided to now expand and add in more artists and the musicians and the visual artists and all these kinds of people, so that you can just become a whole huge collective that anybody can come and there's just open to everybody, and now be the one that sits there and bridges this entire gap, so that every one of these artists doesn't really have to go through the whole length of building an institution alone and trying to do the marketing and the distribution and the social media and all that kind of stuff. So we just decided to be altruistic enough to do the work there. And yes.
Yvonne, what about, you were definitely part of that founding community of Kwani and part of that energy. And I wonder, sort of hearing Kwani with a Q talking about their origins. Can you tell us a little bit about that moment of inception of that group coming together, and what similarities and what differences you might observe?
Oh no, let's see. I think the Kwani starts when we hear this strange name, Binyavanga Wainaina has won the Cain Prize. And he's won the Cain Prize for the kind of story that we thought, to be honest, having been brainwashed through the SAP years, we never thought we'd be able to write that kind of story. It was a story about us. It was a story about our angst. It was what I think a previous... I'm not going to mention the publisher said that's why they called us the navel-gazing generation. But it was navel-gazing, but in a kind of interesting way. It was also a story about, yes, Kenya, and it wasn't looking necessarily out, but it was looking at our contradictions within. And and you recognize the personalities in that particular story, and you're thinking, this is splendid, this is so unusual. And so I remember Anne McCreath and everybody among the small kind of literary community, it wasn't much, it was mostly whining, complaining kind of people. So Anne McCreath, and Anne McCreath was very much, as the Kiko Romeo owner. She said, but who's Binyavanga? Who knows him? Apparently he's a Nakuru guy. And then we found out very quickly through our networks when he was coming in to Kenya. We didn't meet him at the airport, but what Anne McCreath did, she had this lovely house with a garden and said, okay, I'm going to host something. And so that at least we can get to meet this Binyavanga person. And we came out of the woodwork, so many of us. And I think Anne expected probably at most maybe 30 people to show up. If we were probably about 100 and something, maybe a little more. But literally we came out to stare at Binyavanga. To look at this human being. And do you know that was the moments where so many lives changed, not just my own, but right across the continent. It is no lie to say, it is, he was like this incredible spark for the literary revival that took place in the entire continent. In a moment, like I said, we all gathered around just looking at him. And he had this way, are you a writer? Are you a writer? Are you a writer? You're a writer, you're a writer kind of thing. And people say, oh, the publishing industry, that woe is me kind of thing. And he said, F that. This is the day of this is the digital age. You don't need what do you call it? The guardians of the gate are so irrelevant. Right, directly. And literally, that's where Kwani, the seeds of Kwani, literally begin in Anne Margret's garden. And then the late Ali Zaidi makes his garden available. So it becomes a kind of every weekend we're in the gardens of Ali Zaidi. There are quite a few people, just incredible energy, and it was also filmmakers and visual artists, and Yvonne basically said, let's just get on with it. In my case, I'm privileged that my story Weight of Whispers opens the first Kwani, but in my case, I write it to get Binyavanga off my back. Because I wrote one story and I was so shy about it and sent it out as anonymous. Which he honored. But then he said, Yvonne, from you, I want fiction. From you, I expect fiction. So I say Binya saw the writer in me before I recognized it. And when he says, from you, I want fiction. So let's say he's saying that on Sunday. On Monday, he's saying, Yvonne, is my story ready? And he's calling 4 times a day. I wrote Weight of Whispers in 5 days to get Binyavanga off my back. But literally, the rest is like. But what happens then is, like I said, it was just such a beautiful energy. And then what happens? Then you have the situation now where people from the rest of the African continent save money to come to Nairobi to be part of this thing. Pastor Lelo calls it the days of love, literally. And so it's not just the kind of people showing up from the rest of the African continent. You have people coming in also from the United States, people literally flying into Kenya so that they can sit in Ali Ghazali's garden over the weekends and be part of this incredible energy. That he yielded so much. I know a lot of people fell off along the way. A lot, maybe, who knows why. But yeah, I think in those heady early days, and I think it was possible because Binyavanga did not believe in impossible. He knew he had decided we were going to be at the center of the world. He had decided that we were going to be the global leaders around literature. And if he had decided that was what it was going to be, kind of thing. So, and then of course he opens up, it's not just him, but this whole, so yes, he's very much the heart of this thing, but around him all these incredible ideas and people. You have open mic. At that time it was so experimental. The assumption nobody's going to show up. I think the first night you're turning people away. And you start in a small room and then the space expands. He brings in Ukufulani, Omao, so you bring in the kind of artists on the edge in this very ecumenical space. I just think of it, it was incredible, really. Such an incredible time. And of course, then the literature emerges. The manuscript prize that opens the doors for so many, not just on the continent, actually, not just in Kenya, but also the continent, quite a few, those names that we now pay attention to, especially from Nigeria, happen because of what happens in Kwani. So people like what is his name? Quite a few, like I said, a lot of institutions get set up on different parts of the continent because of Kwani. So yeah. So what I was trying to say is simply, and then so this is now my part of complaint. So Kenya started it, but then Nigeria takes over, and they've got all these books all over the world, but it started with us.
And we shall triumph once again, because it is a competition, right? It's always been a competition. It's not a competition, but it is a competition. Similarly, the writers, I feel, of the 60s and 70s also had no doubt that they were at the center of the universe and that they were writing the new nations into reality. And I was just thinking about like what you were talking about, the question that you had, Frank, about like where Jonathan had gone. I mean, he had also been an incredible part of so many other writers finding their language and their words. Ngugi wa Thiong'o talks about him so much and their time at Makerere. And then in that very moving biography, also discusses, no, it's not in the biography, it's in the controversial piece by Kari Baraka about Ngugi wa Thiong'o. But we love a good Kari article because he keeps all the things documented and keeps the conversation going. You gotta love a homie that committed to writing about the literary scene and who's able to create so many divisive opinions about anyone as possible. Are you messing with my mic, Kari, wherever you are? We're good friends now. But he describes in that piece of Ngugi going to look for Kariara, to tell Kari about Kariara, and Googling him on the internet and not being able to find enough. And Ngugi's own heartbreak at that moment. I guess the question I have for you is that, what is the question I have for you? Well, first that reflection, but looking at it from your point of view about like how these legacies seem to fall away. And I mean, do we continue to be in danger of those legacies falling away? And so then what kind of publishing world do you think, as a person right on the cusp of getting into it, that we need to generate around writers like yourself and those writers of your generation? What is your heart's cry?
I mean, it's what I said before. I think it's the responsibility of the writers of the current generation to push the previous generation out there, because at the end of the day, we are the one with a direct chain to them. We are the one with the interest. A reader will only look for what they're interested in reading, but a writer might try to find inspiration from different sources from the past, and so that our research is more out there. So I am privileged to work as a journalist, so I have my journalism where I can write about Kariara. I have written about Kwani with a K, with a Q. So I use my journalism to push it out there, but I think one article doesn't do the job. We need books about Kariara, we need books about Binyavanga, we need entire biographies about these writers. And I guess it might start with writers from my generation. Keith might write about Kwani with a K. Another one might pick up a book by Kariara. Yeah.
Yeah, Keith, I want to come to you about that. What publishing ecosystems do you think that we need to create so that we don't keep losing access to these, our legacies of before? Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's a very good question, because it's also a problem that we are currently grappling with, and maybe the thing that has been evidenced by all the discussions that we've had in the past 2 days is that all these things start with a lot of hope and with a lot of energy and with a lot of passion, and then since the people are young and they have all the time and all the energy, they push it along, and then it gets to a particular point where now their life responsibilities override them, and now they have to focus on that, and so the collectives collapse. And we have seen it even with the few literary collectives that have existed in, like, let's say the last 10 years. We had okay, I didn't want to say that, but yes, we had that one. We had the likes of Enkari Review, we had Down River Road. And so the thing is, all of this start because at that particular moment in time, there are these young writers who are trying to get into the literary scene. And when they try to write at that particular moment, there isn't like a particular, let's say, a literary institution that they can send their work to, so they decide to start their own. And since they have all the time, they push it, they just work together based on the vibes and the passion and the energy that they have. But then after some years, life's responsibilities catch up and then it dies. And then after some years, another group of young people come up. And so it becomes the same problem. And maybe so far, the only the groups that have been able to sustain themselves longer, it has come about because of donor funding. I don't want to point fingers, but so the thing about that again is that you realize that it's not sustainable, because at some point in time they pull out, and maybe the organization itself hadn't found its proper footing, and so it's a problem that we're also trying to grapple with, and it's a thing that we're trying to solve and see whether this is something that we can do to ensure that our organization again doesn't fall. Maybe to help answer the question about Kariara and all this documentation of all this in the past, I think maybe the thing that I've been impressed with this conference is that the academics have been able to do research about all these previous Busara, Nexus, Gala, which from where I sit, I wasn't able to access. I think maybe most of the archives are either in Makerere in Uganda or in SOAS in London. And I do appreciate that, and I appreciate that academics do that. But if there was a way for that to, I know it's your hard labor, but if there was a way for that research to be publicly accessible, then again it would help in this work of archiving them, because now it will be easier for a writer to come and write about it, because he can borrow from the research that was done here. So if that could be a thing, if that could be a thing, then it would be easy. I think once upon a time I tried to research about Busara, but then there's only one Kenyan writer who's written about Busara. I think it's Dr. Tom Adhiambo, and it's behind a paywall at the e-repository at UN. But so because of that, I haven't been able to read about it until this conference. But if it were open access previously, then most of us would have been able to read it and to learn about all that kind of stuff.
Also talk a little bit about the publishing ecosystem that you think need to come.
Yeah, definitely. It's very close to my heart. I just want to say my colleague Anya Bengelstoff, who's a festival director for Macondo. So the point I was going to make is that festivals, literary festivals, I love that Nairobi is buzzing with new ones all over the time. So the ecosystem, there have been incredible gaps even from the beginning. And I think there's a consolidated effort as a collective we somehow need to make. Number one is play on the strategies that others have done, like Nanjing had decided that they needed resources linked to their literary world. So what do is they push to ensure that they are a UNESCO City of Literature. We had a previous conversation with the director of culture around that, and he had said, look, if we're going to do it, we have to do it right. And it kind of takes a collective effort of the entire city, and it has to come also from the city, what do they call it now? Our city council, whatever it is, the Kariara, that. So the effort has to start there. I just came back from Colombia, and I realized Medellin has just received that title. I pretended to be very happy about it because I thought it should have been us. But what happens is when you're a UNESCO City of Literature, all sorts of resources are moved in. The kind of resources that we actually need to ensure that the funding gaps and the privileging of a lot of literary kinds of resources move into a country or a city when it becomes a city of literature. Number two, I'm listening to all of this and I realize this may be also a time to think around a literary museum. You want to know how would we, Kariara, Margaret Ogola, Asenath Odaga, Muthoni Likimani, all these incredible legends on whose shoulders we rest. We need a space, a place that a museum. There's nothing wrong. We need, let's say, a literary museum. And not just necessarily for Kenya, but also maybe for East Africa, because of people like Okot Pibitek, Charles Barlow, all these people were very much intrinsic to the literary formation of our particular country. And of course, because of the digital age, a lot of literature has moved into maybe, I know it feels like heresy, but to maybe look at the other people like the filmmakers. A lot of literature, certainly in a place like South Korea and China, have also moved into the into film, into the web novel. So a lot of old literature is made accessible in new ways through these particular formats. And of course, finally, the other point is absolutely, if the Kenya curriculum, whatnot, is not going to return literature and composition to schools, I think we need third or fourth spaces where, kind of what you guys are doing, public space, other spaces, there's a focus on craft, focus on the engagement with all literatures, but just to develop that kind of, yeah.
Thanks so much for all those interesting thoughts. I also wonder what the role is of the literary departments in the universities, and if we could just win back and fund some of those spaces, how incredible that would be. I want to come to you, our loyal and faithful audience so far, and see if you have any questions that you'd like me to put to these wonderful panelists. And I think we have a mic that's going to come down to you. Shall I share this one?
Good evening, everyone. Since we've come from an academic conference, my question will touch on literary education. How has it shaped Kenyan literature and Kenyan writers? Thank you.
Well, we'll let everybody take a little stab at that, because I expect you have very different perspectives, and maybe speak to your own experience a bit.
Okay, so for me, most of my writing background or knowledge came about mostly from reading newspapers, but in terms of the literary education, I think the most we used to do were the set books, where we used to read like 3 set books in English and 3 set books in Kiswahili, and then the usual compositions in Insha. I was a very huge reader, so of course the learning that I got from them, or the inspiration that I got from them, gave me more curiosity to read more. And I guess even for the composition, or because I had a foreign teacher for one of the language for one of my classes, and so he was able to teach us more beyond just the usual, and so that enabled me to look up beyond to whatever level we were expected to write at that particular time. And so this boosted me a little bit, and he used to help us at least sign up to the newspaper competitions that used to happen at the time. We had Swahili competitions for the Taifa Leo newspaper, where we used to submit inshas, and we used to be ranked the top 50 nationwide every month. I think there was a time I was number 4 in Swahili.
What do you say?
Yeah. And so I do give credit to my teachers at the time, because at least they shaped me, and they were able to help me look beyond whatever we were learning at the time. And so for me it was a yes, they did help me and they shaped me very well. And of course the beatings.
Absolutely fundamental, actually. They're the yeast for this particular journey, and I keep wondering why it's constantly being undermined at whether it's from primary to secondary to even at the university level. And this is actually, I think what you've touched on is actually the wound and the sore point, and the place actually where the growth, the fount of what could be. In my case, if it was not for my teachers, I can't even imagine what would have happened if they were not there. Yes, I was a reader, but this kind of as both midwives, not just of the word and of the craft, but the ones that reveal to you that the power of ideas. You can wrestle with ideas. I was a very shy and very closed student in primary school. If it was not for teachers like Mrs. Lochran and Sister Maureen, who saw Again, thank you for the question, because I think this is actually the crux of everything.
My education in literature was mostly informal, and apart from the set books, it comes from the privilege of coming of age in the age of digital publishing. Because I remember the first time I knew that being a writer was a thing. I was in high school at a library, and then I saw these 12 guys from University of Nairobi had founded a journal called Enkare Review. And this Enkare had published an interview with a New Yorker editor, and I was like, oh, okay, New Yorker seems like a big deal. I didn't know what New Yorker was, but yeah. And when I started reading the journal, I was like, okay, this is something, because I could see something published on a site on one page, then you see the bio, you are like, okay, this writer has been published in this platform, and then the platforms are different, but they are all digital. When you Google them, you find them. So I used to read every digital journal I found, and that's how I became a writer. So my education was mostly informal, and because the literary spaces in Kenya are mostly concentrated in Nairobi, because I grew up away from the city. Outside, we never had the exposure to whatever was happening in the scene, but by the grace of God and by the internet, I discovered some.
We've got to put that on a t-shirt, by the grace of God and the internet. That's right. Yes, there's a question over there, and then we're going to go to a question from the young man over there.
Mine isn't really a question, it's more of a comment. But it's
the
also
most
speaking...
Kenyan statement ever. But go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, but it's mostly speaking to, I think, what you were speaking about. I'm also from Naivasha, so that's nice to see a homie, you know. And I was thinking just around how the literary space, like the literary education also, in a sense, shapes readers, because I feel like I was shaped. I remember, well, I was in, privileged home, because we were being bought this, you know, those Ladybird series books, those one for young children. And at this time I was like in, was it class 1, class 2, just to keep you, like we read the books before we watched the movies. At that time the movies weren't a big thing. But then I remember I studied at Naivasha DB, District Educational Board. That's a public institution. And I remember our English teacher used to allow us during the games time to go to the library. There was a communal library right next to the school. And he'd be like, for this 40 minutes, I have spoken to the headmaster. This class, at that time I think we're in class 6 or 7, you can go to the library. I think that was very foundational, because then we were getting access to books, and we would, I think that's when I met the pesetas, you know, the Nas Trufena, and yeah, you know those. And then I think you mentioned it, I think when you're talking, Yvonne, and that's when it hit me, because when I came to campus, I didn't know what to expect when I was coming to do a literary degree. And I was like, by then I had read Akina Sidney Sheldon, Akina, you know, those, you know, Candace Tale. And I'm like, this is what I'm coming to do here in the university. And then I get there, and then the first book we are given is The Cockroach Dance by Meja Mwangi. And I'm like, what is this? So I think it is true that schools do impact, but I feel like the focus has been mostly in campuses or in the university, and maybe we need to do a bit more, I don't know, groundwork to get them to the primary levels, because these are formative years of students, and literature
there was a group of young writers who existed 20 years before, because that was in 2022, and they decided to like become ambitious and start this thing. So the wave that I was, or the thing that we had at the time when I was starting on was ambition, basically. And even when we finally sat together and decided that this is exactly what we'll do, so I reached out to one of the people who are in the old Kwani with a K and asked him how this particularly happened in terms of finances, because I had looked up, of course, the supporters of Kwani, and of course there was some funding, and there was this particular grant, this particular prize that somebody won, and asked how much this was that supported them, and it was somewhere in the millions, 1.2 million, and he told me that this is the amount of money that you need in case you want to start something off. And of course at the time I was barely 20 and I didn't have that kind of money, but I had the ambition to actually start this, and I decided that I realized that okay, we can start with whatever small thing we have, and then later on we can catch up, and eventually we'll get to the level that we want to get. So basically ambition is the thing that we had, and of course the spirit of friendship is whatever kept us going up to this date.
Thank you for that. That's a very beautiful question. I think the part of the Kwani story that's always missing is all those people who gathered around Kwani contributed, gave money for even up to 6 months. There'd be money coming in from our own pockets. We were naive. I think you said what caused us to jump into that wave? Naivete. And a kind of delusion, a positive kind of delusion. Because it was Binyavanga, and because Binyavanga said that we were going to be at the pinnacle of the world, we decided we were going to be at the pinnacle of the world. And it's amazing how much then life gathers around madness. To make things possible. So there was that. And then, I think then what happens then, there are dips because the reality is money, ego, the fact that writing is hard. Writing is hard. People, and sometimes the muse that shows up is a muse that wants you to toilet it for 7 years. And so there's all these other aspects that come in. So, and though a few of us, when you stick to it, I'm not saying that it's, and there were some brilliant, absolutely brilliant writers that, what does one say? That yes, in retrospect, and now I can say writing is hard. Don't do it if you're not going to, if you don't understand that it's not a walk in the park. But then do it because there's no other park walk you'd rather take, so to say. So that's the thing. So then when reality sets in and saying, are you going to walk this path? A lot of people say no, it's too much. So then and to walk this path means you cut out a lot of things. In my case, simplify my life. Avoid those corporate temptations. Live without a car because there's nothing else that I'd rather do. And maybe it has its own reward in the end, and then that's the, I guess that's the thing. So when reality sets in, but the initial jump is a kind of positive madness.
Because my initial inspiration into writing was through the internet, through Encounter Review. So people used to meet every time. So I came to Nairobi looking for that community, and I remember at my first people used to meet every time. So I came to Nairobi looking for that community, and I remember at my first event I met with Cave.
Very wonderful pieces. Very wonderful pieces. I've just seen an advert, and I'm wondering, maybe in terms of publishing, is it part of something that you want to go towards, or maybe I just saw an advert there in that book. And I know there are so many issues, and So I was just comparing it to Transition Magazine and the aspect of maybe advertisements. But again, I also know books of anthologies.
It's in the seat behind you. So we have the creative director over there called Mutinda, the guy with the bald head. We have the short girl next to her. Can you just stand on top of the seat so that they can see you? She's called Natasha Muhanji. Actually, she's the one on the poster over there. So she wrote an article about how SAPs affected the Gen Zs. And she also won an award with her first ever short story in Kwani, just like Yvonne won an award with her first short story in Kwani with a K. And then we have Fidelis Njugi over there, who is a very great poet and a very great graphic designer and a very great storyteller. So we work together and we have a very great team of comic artists. So eventually, I'd give credit to Mutinda more because this was his brainchild. And so we decided that we can provide actually some space for, again, our colleagues who are doing some businesses to like have a space to just advertise their work, but then not to do it in the very formal or traditional or boring way that people do in newspapers where they just like place a poster or something, but to like find a way to make it, again, to utilize the space very well and to make it attractive and just interesting to look at. For example, the ad possibly that you're referring to is a friend of mine sells phones at Kimathi Street, but rather than just show like the usual way how his shop looks, there are usually these people on the streets who, when they steal phones and then they come to you when you're standing in the queue of the matatu and they show you this particular phone that they have and tell you that, oh, nimeibai Samsung na neza kuachia na 4K. So basically the ad just looks like a guy just showing you all the phones that he's stolen here. And it's a very great addition to, it's a very great advertisement. Again, it's very attractive. It's very great to look at. And so, yeah, that's something that you're looking to do. And I guess you can just clap for Mutinda. That is his idea more than mine. So, yes, and thank you. And, yeah, in case any of you has a business that you're doing, yeah, you can come and look for us after this.
Good evening. My name is Brenda Asimwe. I'm a children's book author, and I'm from Uganda. This has been such an exciting and very insightful discussion. Not too long ago, I visited the Kenya Library Service in Upper Hill, and when I was interacting with some of the librarians, I walked into a section which has like this huge collection of Kenyan books, and I was like, I mean, this is incredible. And from the discussion, of course, I understand, like why that's the case. Like Kenyans are writing and they're publishing, but I think I'm curious. I mean, to hear from you, like, why do you? As in, what's the drive? Like, what's driving Kenyans to write and publish? Yeah, I would like you to talk more about that. Thank you.
Say, first of all, how delightful. Thank you. Kenyans are writing and publishing. I'm glad we're the heroes of someone's stories as the writers. Stop comparing ourselves just to the Nigerians. We're doing amazing. Yeah. And so, continuing our legacy. So I think it's a really lovely question to close our discussion on. And so we'll just hear from everybody. We'll start with you, Frank, and then come to, we can start with you, Keith. Keith is always ready. So we'll start with Keith, and then we'll go to Yvonne. And the future is very secure. We should all be Keith, right? And be like, I also am selling, what am I? No. But here we go, Keith.
I think for the case of most of the writers that I know, it's usually a case for them having a story to tell. And as a non-fiction writer, my inspiration to write was that, of course, I used to read all these newspapers and all these non-fiction books, and then I enjoy the content. At the time, they were mostly philosophy and some science and all those nerdish kind of things that I used to be when I was a young guy, before the world happened. And I used to enjoy like telling these stories to my friends, and so just my inspiration to start writing was to have a way to like cement these things somewhere, because I had read all this stuff and I didn't just want to keep it to myself, and so I just wrote to share it to people and to share all this newfound knowledge that I have, so that we can just sit and have all these discussions. So for me it was because of having a story to tell.
Thank you for that sweet comment. I'm of the age where the great admiration used to be Ugandan. You were the standard. You were the absolute standard. You know, Uganda, all of these kind of incredible kind of literature was from Uganda, and it was part of our curriculum. I'm glad you're saying we're writing. I keep thinking, I've got this constant anxiety looking at mostly what the Nigerians are doing. with a kind of both, constant angst, thinking, we're not writing enough. We're not writing enough. But actually, you're right. Maybe one needs to look at the glass and say, maybe it's half full after all. Yeah.
I think, personally, I write because I grapple with questions. So since childhood, I have grappled with questions of who am I in this country? What's my position? In the past few years, have been grappling with the questions of where are we headed as a nation with everything that happened in 2024 and 2025, and with the forthcoming elections and all that. So I write because I'm trying to answer some questions that I don't know if I will ever find answers to. Yeah.
So in another very classic Kenyan fashion, there's a little backdoor question here. So,
good evening. My question is, which one is more important when it comes to writing? Is it expression or influence? And by expression, I mean a reflection of what is going on in our society or our era, or influence, which means making an impact. And I'm asking this because the current country's political landscape, there's been a fear of expressing oneself. For example, there's this school that had a performance, and their performance had to be banned because it had something towards the political environment. So that's my question. Which one is more important? Is it influence or expression?
Okay, Keith, will you start us off again?
My response to this will actually be counterintuitive to what I had actually answered as my reason why I write. But there was, I can't remember who exactly said this, but that as a writer, or even Frank, the way he has expressed this, that as a writer sometimes, or he writes for himself, and even, I think it was Bethel Ogot who, when writing his works, he didn't care about who exactly will read his works, but that he had actually written his work, and sometimes he did all this search of knowledge just so that he can write it and just write it for himself and have all this out here. So I'd lean more on the expression part, because I mean, when you write your work and you put it out there, so you never really know where exactly it will reach, especially in this age of the internet, because when the guys at Nkare Review were writing, they didn't really know that somebody in Naivasha will get to read their work and be inspired by it. So for most of for a writer, I'd say expression might be the main thing, because you're writing, even for me, it is to convey this particular message or to share this particular story, but it's mostly about me expressing what exactly I feel with this, and how I resonate with this, and that kind of stuff.
My opinion, I think I keep saying it, my own loyalty, my first and only loyalty is to the kingdom of story. So my loyalty is to the muse. So maybe for me, it's neither influence or that. It's what the story asks of me. And the fact that the play was what do you call it, banned, it's a tradition of the state to always feel intimidated and feel insecure about the arts, and I'm sure the author, in the end, it's a kind of situation that authors actually look forward to, because it makes sure it sells the work and it sells the book, and it also means then that, in my case, I also say that if you're reading my work and you're not comfortable, then I've succeeded. Yeah.
I think to answer you, I would go with, you can do both. You can write for expression, you can write for influence, because I can write to express something that happened in my childhood, and in also the same writing, I can write how that thing influenced my being. influenced the person I am. So I think if you can hold both of them at once, it works as well. Yeah.
So I think on that wonderful note, I think this is, I can bring our conversation to a conclusion and agree. I think we've answered all the questions in the room. I want to thank you all so very much for being such extraordinary panelists and contributors to the conversation, and for being so clear and so thoughtful in your responses. As we just say goodbye to the audience, I'd really love for you to tell them something about the work that you're doing next and where people can connect with you if they would like to, because life is all about staying in touch with one another, without that being a pressure conversation whatsoever about where the next writing is. It's not that. It's just, where can people find you and what can they look forward to?
Okay, at the moment we are currently planning to work on another book, because we usually try to produce a book every year. So we are possibly planning to work on a 5th edition of our book, and perhaps the focus might be on the elections of the next year. And you can just find us on you can find us on socials as Kwani, Qwani. We usually do so many things besides books. We usually do all kinds of events. We have like 2 events every week. That's how idle and unemployed we are. And yes, I think we have so many things, but yeah.
Come to Macondo, 18th to the 20th of September. All sorts of wonderful writers from global Africa, and all sorts of gorgeous, gorgeous events. And you will certainly run into me there.
You can find me anywhere on social media as Frank Njugi, I think. My journalism, I write for Cinema Focus, Afrocritic, so you can find my journalism on those 2 platforms. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, guys. Yeah. You're right, and then this awkward moment. Oh, you're closing us out. Yes, go on.
I'm saving you from the awkwardness. All right, thank you so much for coming this evening. Could we clap for our speakers one more time? And for Sheba, she was a wonderful moderator, right? Thank you so much to each one of you. What a pleasure to learn from all of you. I love Yvonne so much, so much. I interviewed her for my thesis, and she was so generous with me. And you made me actually want to, just pursue an intellectual career. When Yvonne is speaking, she's like, wow. Yeah, so I love you, so just so you know. And in front of everyone, I've declared my love for you. But to the audience, clap for yourselves for being such a wonderful audience. And to this wonderful space, 30 House, the staff, the space is gorgeous. The staff have been amazing. Thank you, wherever you are. Thank you so much. And to the working team, photography, videography, the volunteers from University of Nairobi, and Wanjeri. Clap for Wanjeri. Okay, and thank you to the Nairobi Literary Networks. We have another event happening on Thursday. Please check out our socials. It's happening at Eastlands Library. So please, hope we see you there for another amazing conversation. We are making history with all these conversations, So this is what I think 10 years from now, we'll be talking about, like the 1962 conference and the soirees that were happening at people's houses. Like Yvonne was talking about the one that Binyavanga's coming and, everyone waiting to see him. Yeah, so this is one of those. They'll talk about 30 House. There were people there, remember? We'll be in the books of history. Yeah. So thank you to everyone, and the bar is open. So stay around, have some fun. It's Tuesday? Yeah, have fun. Have fun. Yeah, that's it. Thank you so much for coming, and stay around, take photos. Speakers are going to take photos. I was told that the photo booth is outside. Oh, it's here. Oh, okay, so it's going to be here. So take photos, and then we go to the bar. There's food, there's drinks. Just talk to someone you didn't come with. And if you're introverted,
it's still okay. Just stay around. Don't talk to people. It's fine. Yeah. All right. Thank you, and have a lovely night.